So, completing the square. Part 1. Find the value of c, this number on the end, that makes the expression a perfect square trinomial. You're like, okay, what's a perfect square trinomial? You've heard it before, okay. What that basically means is you would have something, let's say like this. Now, perfect square trinomial, you would assume a perfect square is somewhere in it, and it will be. It'll be down here at the end of your term, because what multiplies to 4 and adds to 4? 2 and 2, okay? So I could write that as x plus 2x plus 2, or I could write it as x plus 2 squared. This is an example of a perfect square trinomial. If I factor it, and I can get it all smashed down into one set of parentheses because they would both be identical, that's what this is. So we're going to be creating these through use of completing the square. So for our deal here, then write the expression as the square of a binomial. Okay? Perfect square trinomial. Let me switch my arrows here. This is the perfect square trinomial. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the square of a binomial. So here's how it works. Step 1. Divide my b value. What's my b value in number 1? Okay. My b value here is -8. So my first step is to divide b by 2. Okay. -8 divided by 2 is what? -4. You're like, all right. Step number 2. Square the answer from step 1. So -4 squared is 16. That 16 is my c value. And the reason that helps me, the reason that works is, number 1, okay, 16, perfect square. If I were then to plug that back in for c, and do the same process that I did with our example up here. So let's just say, I'm like, okay, let's say I'm doing the same thing on this one. So I go to look and I say, all right, so I've got x squared. That's not showing up real well now, is it? Is that showing up better? Yes. Okay. Minus 8x. But now that I know what c is by dividing b by 2 and squaring it, 8 plus 16. The cool thing about this is you know it's got to be the same number. What number multiplies to positive 16 but adds to -8? Close. -4, -4. So that would be my square of a binomial based on this perfect square trinomial. But this is the process that basically makes or breaks this. We've got to be able to do those 2 steps to make this work. Now, is it always going to be nice and clean? No. We want to deal with decimals. Oh, heck no. Okay? Because that takes our whole perfect square idea away. So here, if I look at 2, what's my b value? -3. Okay? So my first step, yuck, is -3 over 2. If it doesn't go in clean, leave it. Okay? Because it's going to make life much easier on us when we get to the factoring part. So if I square that, what's going to come out in fraction form? Okay? 9 over 4. When you square b, well, in this case, when you square half of b, it's always going to come out positive. Okay, so if you type it in your calculator, it's just negative 3 over 2 squared, and you're like, Mr. Harty, it says negative 9. It's because you didn't use parentheses. Okay, so this would be my C value. This would be, let me try to separate these so we can get a look at this in the middle. You're like, how is this one going to work? So you'd have x squared minus 3x, and you're like, ooh, plus 9 over 4. Harty, I have a hard enough time with these other ones, and now you're telling me I'm going to have to do this with 9 over 4. No, I'm not. Because let's look at something for a minute. There's a shortcut to this. Most of the time there is. Let's look back at number 1 for a second. When I did negative b divided by 2, what did I get? What ended up in the parentheses in my binomial term? Negative 4. So let's try and apply that here. What was b divided by 2? Negative 3 halves. What do you think is going to be in the other side of my binomial term? Negative 3 halves squared. Okay? This isn't a bad thing. You're not going to have to be a math superstar to be able to do this. But there again is going to be detail work that you've got to work with. One more time. Let's see if we can kind of put it together here before we jump into the actual completing. In number 3, what's B? Yeah, some of you are a step ahead of me here, okay? But right. B divided by 2, or half B, is 13. Step 2 is to square that number, which is 169, which would be my C value. One of the things we've got to get used to is the language of this. Because when we hit a quiz, there will be a question that's asked just like this. Find the value of C that makes it a perfect square trinomial, then write the expression as a square. So here's my C, that's the first part. Then the last part of that, again, is to look at this and say, okay, x squared plus 26x plus 169 is really what? X plus 13 squared. Okay? Because that, what's that? No, because once you've done this part, the only part that's left to completing the square is one part of addition, square root it, break it apart. So we keep going back to what we were doing in 5.3. But we'll make sure this works. So, when we get down here, here are the steps to complete the square. You're like, oh my gosh, 5 steps. Okay, but again, make sure the coefficient of x squared is 1. So if there's a number in front of it, we're going to have to divide through. Okay? And we'll kind of make note of that here. Yeah. Right. So if it's not, you're going to divide by the x squared coefficient. But right, we're not going to get to that until the back. We want to get the process down first before we get fancy. All right. So we're going to write the equation in the form x squared plus bx. Now here's what that means. We're going to kind of do the first one while we're going down the steps here. Coefficient's 1 by x squared, so step 1 check. Write the equation in the form x squared plus bx. In other words, we just want the x terms together. They're a little snotty. If you don't have an x, you need to get out. So, minus 3, out. Off to the other side with you. Now, then it talks about adding blanks to each side. And I wrote this a little too skinny, so I'm going to have to add them in here. So when I get the x's by themselves on a side, for right now at least, I want to make sure that you get this blank working on each side. Here's how the blank works. You'll notice when you get to step 3, it says add b divided by 2 squared to each side. In other words, What we did up in the top in part 1, we need to do that now. So, my b is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And square it. That 25 is what gets added to each side. Okay? X's on their own. Add my half b squared to each side. So I look and I say, okay, what have I got now? What's this going to be is a binomial square. Okay? X plus whatever I did when I did b divided by 2. Okay? So x plus 5 squared equals 28. And then solve it. Perfect. Take the square root. The squared and square root are inverses. Oh, okay. Two things. Plus or minus. And if your radical breaks down, you need to break it down at this point. This does. Ah! No, no decimals. Decimals are not allowed. 2 square root of 7. Do not go to decimal form. What's my last step? Subtract the 5. Now remember, standard form says we put the constant term first, then the radical form. Wouldn't that have been fun to factor with that answer? Probably not. So that's how these work. But again, as you get better at it, there's parts you're going to be able to just whip through and skip. But the problem, well, let's do this. Try 6. Get going on 6 for about a minute. I'm going to turn myself off on this for a second here. You go ahead and work on 6. I'm going to work on 6 on here because I can still see what I'm doing. And then once you're situated, try using 4 or the ones up above to help yourself out. And try working through. Okay. You got the exact same thing. Did you use this problem or did you use the problem from before? Oh my. Yes. You're not. Why are you not doing number 6? Oh. Alright. Hang on here for a minute. All this dead airspace. I don't know if this is going to be good on video. Might hurt my video rating. Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody has yet. I haven't looked at the help, but I said this weekend I was going to celebrate. It looks like I'm closing in on 500 views. I'm going to have to. I've only been up for 9 weeks. It's not bad. Finish that one up. I'll give you about another 30 seconds here to clean things up at the end, and we'll see how this is going. Yeah, I was going to say, everybody goes at their own pace. It's about getting it right, not how fast you can do it. Okay, I'll wait. I better say something about these. People are like, why is there just no voice? Yes, I'm still here and alive. We are just completing number 6. I'm just hanging on here to give everybody a chance to do it. You should be doing this at home as well if you are waiting. Except you can see it at home right now because it's on the screen. All right. I'm uncovering.
I got you on.
Oh, blurry. If some of you got 2 square root of 8, you did not take the large. Yes, you did not take the largest perfect square. Now, if that's the only thing you're having issues with, is that you went 2 square root of 8 instead, that's not a bad thing. As I say, that's one very minor thing you can still take care of. Again, you want to get those biggest perfect squares out of there. So we're going to keep working on some of the mental math things with that.
I can do it.
Well, that's okay.
Oh, I added the 4.
Yeah, to get it over there, if it's positive 4, you have to do an opposite to move it to the other side. So yeah, there's going to be some detail things here that can kind of drive you crazy if you're not cautious. But we always have to have those x terms by themselves. All right, what's that? Okay, good question. Why would this then not be minus? 2 reasons. One, whenever I'm adding this value to both sides, whenever I take my b, divide it by 2, and then square it, even negative numbers are going to become positive. So whatever is going to both sides, when I get to this step, is always going to be plus something. It'll never be minus anything. Yep, that's what can get us on that. I want to look at one more on this side before we throw the one last twist in. All right, here we go. No, number 7. That's even more fun. All right. Okay. Oh, that could be scary. I'll take my time with it. Do I need... On number 7, do I need to move anything at the start? No. We already have the x squared and the x by themselves. So, x squared plus 14x plus something equals negative 57 plus something. So, take your b, divide it by 2, and square it, 49. Because 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. Okay, so we got that. What is my square of a binomial going to look like? X plus 7 squared equals negative 8. Oh, yeah, remember. Oh, yeah. Remember, whenever there is a negative here, to get rid of the negative when we go to do the square root, remember, you have to pull an eye out and then bounce it. Okay, now. So, I know it's plus minus. Can I break the 8 part down? You will in a moment. Square root of 4 is 2. The I has to come out with it. Because remember, if you think back to what we were talking about when we were doing this section, you pull the I out to make what's inside positive, and then you still break this down like you would normally, except now the 2 has a pal waiting out there, I. Whenever there's a negative value underneath the radical, you've got to pull an I out, and then finally, yeah. Whenever you take a square root and you try to take it of a negative number, the only time you're going to have to pull an I out is then. As soon as you see that negative value and you're taking a square root, that I gets plucked right out. Yes! Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, but you want to leave it in an improper fraction form, because if you do it and start getting into mixed numbers, it really makes it hard when you start trying to do the math work at the end. All right. Oh, gracious. Are we ready? I think we're ready for this. All right. Flip over. When we get to the back, we're going to number 10. And once we have number 10 up, I'm doing the song to number 10. Yes. Well, it's an attempted song. I don't know if I'd actually call it singing, but whatever. No, and I have a copy to give you when we're done. No, my song goes to "We Will Rock You." It goes on the same musical type thing. Yes. No, I don't mean that. Like lyrics and things. Oh, gracious. No, I don't think you'll want... You can burn it off my YouTube page if you want it that badly. Okay. All right. Number 10. What is now different? Yes, there's a number in front of x squared. So if there's a number in front of x squared, we divide every term here by that number, even if it causes us a fraction. Okay? Even if it doesn't go in evenly, you have to deal with the fraction. Now, in this case, there is no fraction. Okay? So that's our first step. Divide by through, we're good. Okay? Right. Now, I've got to get the 6 out of there. Okay. No, this is now what we're completing the square with. So yeah. Correct. Yep, my B value, good question. My B value is based on this. Okay, so my B value is -2 that I'm working with. So, what am I going to be adding to both sides? It would be +1. Because remember, okay, because -2 divided by 2, I agree, is -1. But remember, we're squaring it and everything's going into parentheses. It's always going to be plus something. You're never going to get a negative number out of there. But I'm glad we're talking about this stuff. That helps. So, let's see here. What's my binomial going to look like? X minus 1. Because again, that's what I got when I divided b by 2. Squared equals -5. My gosh, we're almost there. Square root. This is starting to get a little tight. X minus 1 equals, what's the right side of my equation going to look like? Plus or minus I square root of 5. Not quite the same as high 5. And then x is going to be 1 plus or minus I square root of 5. All right. Let me pause this for right now.